Here's the things that you'll notice in yourself as you become a being of light. First thing you'll notice is that your inner mantra will change. The mantra of the ego, what's in it for me? The mantra of the higher self is, how may I serve? My inner mantra for a good portion of my life, my 20s, 30s, 40s, was, what's in it for me? How much can I get? My mantra today is, how may I serve? How many people can I reach? How can I even be more generous with what I have? And it will become an automatic thing. As you become a being of light, you'll notice the sense of humility, and you'll start seeing yourself aligning with God. Where the path to God ends, the path in God begins. You begin to be and act like God. Some of these I've spoken about before. You'll start seeing yourself having a burning desire for radical well-being. I'm working right now at seeing how healthy I can make myself, and at what high a level I can make my body function at things that I never thought were possible before. With my eating, with my exercising, with my meditating, with what I read. I find myself spending 3-4 hours a day now just reading, spiritual literature that thrills me to do so. You'll find that you'll begin to see the unfolding of God in everyone that you encounter. Rather than seeing appearances, rather than seeing what the person looks like, rather than seeing their age, rather than seeing the color of their skin, rather than seeing their religious beliefs, rather than seeing what they're wearing and so on. Highly functioning people keep their imagination pure. You'll notice that you don't ever want to put anything into your imagination that you don't want to manifest. That's one of the great lessons of higher consciousness. That you don't want to put things into your consciousness that say, it's difficult, I can't do that. It'll take too much time, I can't afford it. You never place anything into your imagination that you don't want to manifest. So you have to understand that if you put your thoughts are the currency that you have for your life. And then acting like it says in the book of Romans, he calls those things which do not exist as though they did. You have to act as if assuming the feeling of the wish already being fulfilled and come from that place. You'll find yourself detaching from outcome. Not doing things because of how much you're going to make or what kind of rewards you're going to get or how much you're going to get or what the stars and the trophies and so on that you're going to get. You find yourself acting in your life, doing the things that bring you a sense of joy and detach from the outcome. And the irony is that when you detach from outcome, the things that you used to have as shortages in your life start to show up. The money starts showing up. The right people start showing up. The circumstances start showing up. You find yourself banishing doubt, trusting your own intuition, seeing beauty in ordinary places. Everything just looked so beautiful, like all of you do to me. Even here right now in this moment as we're getting ready to leave, all I can see are just happy, contented, beautiful human beings who have honored me by coming here and being willing to listen to me for a couple of days. It's a thrill that I can't even describe in words. You'll see it even in people that you used to think were unappealing or unattractive. You'll see it in poetry. You'll see it even in the music that you listen to. Life just becomes this moment-to-moment ecstasy. I had a little checklist of things like, you'll start having aha moments or eureka moments. Oh my God, that's what it is. You get struck by awe and wonder. Sell your cleverness, purchase bewilderment. You'll be visited by sudden sense of peace and calm. Inspiration comes to you quickly. Unexpectedly, you feel loved, not by a person, but just loved. I feel that all the time. I just feel so loved. I walk into a room like this in a country in an opposite hemisphere from where I live. Sometimes you'll just think of a person's name and the next moment that person will appear for you or they'll call you on the telephone. This kind of stuff will happen more and more. You'll find you have a particular desire and it gets fulfilled on its own. You'll have a sense that you're always being guided. Do you really sense that? Do you really feel that there is guidance available? And if you want more of it, just be that love. And ultimately, you'll start to have a sense, an awareness that there's a purpose to all of this, that this is a universe that has no accidents. It's orchestrated by a divine, infinite intelligence. And who you are is not this body you're in, or these thoughts you have, or this mind of yours. All of these things showed up in the space, the quiet, empty space.
There is a door within you that opens only when you decide to put down the weight you were never meant to carry. That weight is resentment. That door is called forgiveness. And what lies beyond it is not weakness, not surrender, but your own unshackled freedom. You see, your soul came into this world not to hold on, but to let go. Not to collect wounds and grievances, but to grow through them and move beyond them. But the mind, that loyal servant of the ego, clutches tightly to its pain. It builds a fortress around every injustice and names it truth. It stockpiles old betrayals like sacred scrolls and keeps them on the shelves of your inner world, dusting them off with pride, as if remembering the pain is the same as preventing it. But what the mind calls protection, the soul calls imprisonment. There is no peace in holding on to anger, no joy in nursing the ache of what was. You do not become stronger by staying bitter. You do not become wiser by staying wounded. You do not become free by replaying the same hurt over and over, like a broken hymn echoing through the halls of your past. Forgiveness is not about the other. It is not a pardon for what was done, nor a denial of your pain. It is the act of removing the knife from your own heart, not because the blade didn't cut deep, but because you choose to bleed no more. To forgive is not to forget. It is to remember differently. To remember from a place of clarity rather than chaos, from love rather than fear. It is to release the story that pain is who you are and return to the truth that you are divine, that you are whole, that you are not your suffering. The great philosophers and spiritual teachers did not tell us to forgive because it is easy. They told us to forgive because it is the only way to fly. Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." He did not say this to comfort others. He said it to liberate himself from the cycle of pain. The Buddha taught that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. And even in the Stoic writings of Marcus Aurelius, you will find this wisdom repeated, that you cannot control what others do, but you can always control whether you will let it define you. So I ask you, dear soul, what are you still carrying? Whose name lives in your body like a wound that never closes? What memory still haunts the sacred quiet of your heart? You cannot move forward while dragging the past behind you like a broken cart. And you cannot awaken to the vast sky of your being while clutching tightly to the smallness of your pain. Forgiveness is not something you give to another. It is something you give to yourself, a declaration that you will no longer allow another person's unconsciousness to shape your destiny. It is a sacred refusal to let your past become your prison. You are not here to stay stuck. You are here to transform. And what transforms you is not more anger, not more revenge, not more justification, but surrender. Yes, forgiveness is surrender, but not the kind the ego fears. It is not surrendering to someone else's power. It is surrendering the illusion that you ever lost yours. When you forgive, you take your power back. You reclaim your peace. You stop waiting for someone else to make it right. You stop negotiating with ghosts. Think of the ocean. It does not try to hold back the waves. It allows them to rise, crash, dissolve, and return. That is forgiveness. It is allowing the emotions to move through you, not to stay stuck in you. It is a tide that washes away the hardened footprints of pain so that you may walk barefoot again on the shore of your now. There is no timeline for forgiveness, only a readiness. And you will know you are ready when you are more tired of suffering than you are afraid of letting go. You may think you cannot forgive until the other apologizes, But what if that apology never comes? What if the one who hurt you cannot see their blindness, cannot feel your sorrow, cannot meet you in your depth? Will you let their ignorance hold the key to your inner peace? The truth is this: your freedom has never depended on them. Your healing does not require their awakening. Your soul does not need their remorse to return to its radiance. The energy of unforgiveness creates a dam in the river of life. It blocks the flow of your joy, your vitality, your intuition. And when that dam is released, when forgiveness breaks it open, your spirit rushes forward like a flood, powerful, clear, and reborn. You were not created to live in a cage of old emotions. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are not the names they called you or the moments they abandoned you. You are the one who survived, the one who still breathes, the one who even now has the power to love again. Forgiveness is not forgetting what happened. It is remembering who you are. You are a soul made of stardust and silence. You are the timeless breath of the divine. And no wound, no matter how deep, can erase your eternal worth. When you choose forgiveness, you join with the great current of healing that flows through all life. You participate in the sacred act of renewal. You declare to the universe, I am no longer a victim of my past. I am the author of my now. And the moment you do this, the very moment the chains fall, the air becomes lighter. The heart, once bruised and clenched, begins to soften. The breath becomes a prayer. And something ancient within you exhales for the first time in years. This is the miracle of forgiveness. Not that it changes the past, but that it transforms your relationship to it. You begin to see the pain as teacher, the betrayal as mirror, the wound as initiation. You understand that nothing was wasted, that even the darkest chapter was guiding you home. You may ask, but how do I forgive what feels unforgivable? And the answer, my friend, is not in your mind. It is in your willingness. Forgiveness is not an intellectual act. It is a sacred decision. You don't have to feel it yet. You only have to be willing. Willing to loosen your grip, willing to see differently, willing to heal. And from that willingness, grace will come. A new perspective will dawn. The heart, once closed like a fist, will begin to open like a flower in the sun. You don't need to know how to forgive. You only need to say yes to the healing that is already trying to reach you. Your soul is not interested in blame. It is not interested in being right. It is interested in being free. And forgiveness, true, deep soul-level forgiveness is the key. There is a sacred moment, not seen with the eyes, but felt within the very breath when you finally realize that holding on is hurting more than it's helping. And in that moment, something ancient in you weeps, not out of sadness, but out of relief, because the soul has waited lifetimes for you to come to this edge, the edge where you no longer define yourself by the pain inflicted upon you. This is where transformation begins. To forgive is to choose truth over trauma. It is to let the memory exist without letting it possess you. It is to open the gates of your being and allow the light to pour in where darkness once lived, like a tenant overstaying its welcome. You do not need to fix the past. You do not need to rewrite it. You only need to stop carrying it as if it were your identity. You are not what they did. You are not what they didn't do. You are not the brokenness you inherited. You are the awareness watching it all unfold. And that awareness is untouched. It is eternal. It is divine. The ego wants justice. It wants the scales balanced. It wants the pain repaid. But the soul only wants peace. And peace cannot exist where you are still rehearsing your pain. You may think you are protecting yourself by not forgiving. You may believe that staying angry keeps you safe. But in truth, it is like drinking poison every day, hoping it will harm someone else. It won't. It is only your joy, your vitality, your presence that is being quietly eroded. Forgiveness is not saying what they did was okay. It is saying that you will no longer allow what they did to determine who you are. The soul, when it forgives, does not become weaker. It becomes lighter. It becomes clearer. It becomes closer to its original essence. For the true self was never wounded, never tarnished. Only the mind, the story, the image, only that was bruised, but not the soul. The soul remains what it has always been, free. There is profound wisdom in allowing the past to be past. You do not owe it your allegiance. You do not owe your suffering loyalty. You owe yourself freedom. You owe yourself the release of that heavy burden, because life is not meant to be carried. It is meant to be lived. The lotus grows in the mud, not despite it, but because of it. So too do you rise, not in the absence of pain, but in your sacred decision to grow beyond it. The mind may say, but I can't forgive, it hurts too much. And that is okay. That is not the voice of weakness. That is the voice of someone standing at the threshold of healing. Even the smallest willingness to forgive cracks the door open. And once light finds its way in, healing becomes inevitable. You do not have to forgive perfectly. You only have to forgive honestly. And honesty means acknowledging the pain, not avoiding it. It means sitting with the grief, the rage, the sorrow, not as enemies, but as guests. Let them come, let them speak, let them leave. Your job is not to suppress. Your job is to allow and then to release, because that is forgiveness. It is the art of letting go without needing to forget, without needing to be repaid, without needing it to be fair. It is a return to the only place where peace is possible, the present moment. Every time you choose to forgive, you return to yourself. You come back to the breath. You come back to stillness. You come back to the open field of now, where nothing is missing and everything begins again. Forgiveness is not a single act. It is a spiritual practice, a way of being, a daily choice to choose love over fear, to choose freedom over bondage, to choose now over then. And with each choice, you soften. With each choice, you rise. You begin to see that the person who hurt you was hurt too, that their unconsciousness was their jail cell, that their blindness was their burden. You don't excuse it, but you see it. And in that seeing, you release the need to make them your jailer, because you are no longer a prisoner. The moment you forgive, you leave the cell. And the lock was never on the door, it was only in your mind. This is not a message for the faint of heart. Forgiveness takes courage. It takes spiritual maturity. It takes a willingness to live by higher laws than the ego can comprehend. It is the highest form of self-love to say, I set myself free, not because you earned it, but because I did. Do you see, dear soul? Forgiveness is not for them. It never was. It's for you, for your healing, for your peace, for your life. Your heart was not designed to be a vault of pain. It was meant to be a sanctuary of love. And love cannot grow where resentment roots. So you must become the gardener. Pull out the weeds of bitterness, water the soil with grace, let the light in, and watch as joy, real joy, returns. Not the kind that depends on anyone else, but the kind that arises simply because you are no longer at war with yourself. When you forgive, you return to the sacred truth that you are not separate, that we are all threads in the same divine fabric. And what you do to another, you do to yourself. When you forgive another, you extend grace inward. When you release your grip on their wrongs, you loosen the noose around your own soul. And yes, it takes time, it takes patience, but it begins with one choice: to stop carrying what doesn't belong to your future. You are not here to drag chains. You are here to spread wings. Let this be your moment of decision, the moment you choose to lay the weight down, to breathe deeper, to feel again, to live, because life, true life, begins where forgiveness flows. There is a silence that follows true forgiveness, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of liberation. It is the stillness that comes when the storm has passed, when the inner courtroom has closed, when you no longer need to keep replaying the trial in your mind. And in that silence, you meet yourself again. Not the wounded self, not the defensive self, but the original self, the self before the story, before the betrayal, before the pain had a name. That self has always been there, waiting for you to put down your sword, waiting for you to stop demanding justice in a world that rarely gives it, waiting for you to realize that freedom isn't given, it's chosen. Forgiveness is that choice. It is not an escape from truth, it is a deeper truth. It is not turning a blind eye, it is opening both eyes fully and deciding to see through them with love instead of fear. You were never meant to be a reservoir of resentment. You are a vessel for light. And when you empty yourself of bitterness, you make space for the radiance of your soul to come forth again. No one else needs to change for you to forgive. The apology may never come. The understanding may never arrive. The other may never even know how deeply they hurt you. But none of that matters. Because forgiveness is not about changing the past. It's about reclaiming your power in the present. You are not bound to the events of yesterday unless you tie yourself to them. You are not sentenced to keep reliving the injury unless you choose to stay within the walls of it. The door has always been open. You've just needed the courage to walk through it. Let go of the belief that suffering equals strength. Let go of the idea that being right is more important than being free. Let go of the inner posture that says, until they see, I won't heal, because they may never see, and you deserve to heal anyway. Your healing is not conditional. Your joy is not contingent on someone else's remorse. You are the source. You are the healer. You are the one who gets to decide how long the pain stays. Imagine your spirit like a bird in a cage, the door wide open, yet unmoving, believing the bars are still there. Forgiveness is the act of realizing there were no bars, only the memory of them, and then spreading your wings. When you forgive, you do not lose yourself. You recover yourself. You become whole, not by rewriting the story, but by rewriting your relationship to it. You look at your pain and say, I bless you. You taught me, but you do not define me. This is how the soul evolves. Not through perfection, but through the sacred choice to rise again and again above the level of injury. To meet darkness not with more darkness, but with the light that says, I am more than what happened to me. You become the space through which healing enters the world. And in doing so, you become a healing to others. You begin to understand why the greatest spiritual teachers walk through betrayal, abandonment, suffering, not to remain stuck in it, but to show what is possible when love is chosen anyway. They taught forgiveness not because it was easy, but because it was transformational. The Course in Miracles reminds us all forgiveness is self-forgiveness, because when you forgive another, you release your own mind from the grip of judgment. You stop punishing yourself by carrying the burden of what cannot be changed. To forgive is not to condone, but to transcend. You rise, you bless, you release, and in that release, you discover a new kind of power, not the power that dominates, but the power that liberates. The power that sets your inner world free so your outer life may follow. There's nothing weak about forgiveness. It is the greatest strength the human spirit can embody. Anyone can fight. Anyone can resent. Anyone can stay wounded. But to love in the face of injury, to release when revenge seems justified, to rise when bitterness feels more familiar, that is mastery. That is the divine in human form. That is you when you remember who you are. So I ask you again, what are you still holding? Whose face still lives in the shadows of your thoughts? What moment still echoes in your chest when silence falls? Let it come to the surface. Let it rise like steam from the body. Don't judge it, just witness it with the eyes of compassion, not contempt. And then bless it. Say, I forgive you. I forgive myself. I forgive this moment for being as it was, and mean it, even if your voice trembles, even if the hurt still lingers, even if your hands shake from the weight of letting go, because forgiveness is not a one-time act. It is a rhythm, a devotion, a return. Every time your mind goes back to the wound, you gently guide it back to love. It is a spiritual muscle. The more you use it, the stronger you become. And eventually, the pain that once screamed now whispers. And then one day, it vanishes like fog lifting from a valley. And you are still here, stronger, softer, more radiant than ever. This is the truth, beloved. You were not born to hold grudges. You were born to hold light. You were not born to carry pain. You were born to carry peace. You were not born to relive the past. You were born to create the future. And the moment you forgive truly, deeply, and fully, that future begins. There is a softness that emerges in your being. The moment you forgive, not because you have forgotten, but because you have remembered what truly matters. You remember that love is who you are, not what they gave. You remember that peace is not something you wait for, it is something you claim. You remember that you are not the wounded child still begging for recognition. You are the eternal soul stepping back into your power. Forgiveness is not an act of erasing, but of alchemizing. You take what was once heavy and you transmute it into light. You take what once hurt and you turn it into wisdom. You take what was meant to shatter you and you allow it to sculpt the highest version of you. And what is this highest version? It is the you who knows that nothing outside can take away the divinity within. It is the you who understands that no one can truly harm you because your essence is untouchable. They may bruise the body, they may betray the trust, but they cannot scar the soul unless you let the wound linger through unforgiveness. And so you choose to release, not because it feels good in the moment, but because you are ready to stop giving your future to your past. The longer you hold on to resentment, the longer you delay your destiny. Each time you revisit the hurt with bitterness, you say to life, I'm not ready to move forward. But each time you choose forgiveness, even in a whisper, you open the gates for grace to flow again. Life responds to that. The universe breathes a little easier when you choose love. Creation expands when you stop contracting in pain. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is fierce. It requires a kind of inner strength that most people never cultivate because it demands that you rise above the story. It asks you to see through spiritual eyes, eyes that perceive not what was done, but what can be learned, what can be healed, what can be transcended. It is one thing to be right. It is another to be free. And make no mistake, the world does not need more people proving they are right. The world needs more people willing to be free. Free of stories, free of blame, free of the identity that clings to victimhood like a shield, free of the endless if-onlys that circle the mind like birds without nests, free of waiting for others to redeem what they broke. You do not need anyone else to give you closure. Closure is an illusion, a waiting room of suffering. You don't need closure. You need clarity. You need to see that healing was never about the one who hurt you. It was always about your relationship to yourself. When you forgive, you reclaim that relationship. You say to your own heart, I am ready to honor you. I am ready to live for you. I am ready to stop bleeding from wounds that were never yours to carry forever. And in that moment, you awaken. You awaken to the truth that your peace is more important than your pride. That your future deserves more than the echo of betrayal. That your presence cannot coexist with poison. Yes, resentment is poison, subtle, addictive, justified, but poison still. And the only antidote is the fierce grace of forgiveness. Grace that says, I release you, not because you deserve it, but because I do. Grace that says, I will not shrink into bitterness. I will not bow to pain. I will not become what hurt me. Grace that says, I will choose love. I will walk free. I will trust the process of life again. Because life is always waiting with open hands. But it cannot fill what you keep clenching. It cannot bless what you keep guarding. It cannot flow through a vessel that refuses to empty. Forgiveness is the great emptying. It is pouring out the stale wine of the past to make room for the living water of now. It is uncurling your fingers from the stories that once made you feel safe, but now only make you feel stuck. You are not stuck because of what happened. You are stuck because of how you've held it. And the miracle is this: the moment you change how you hold it, the moment you offer it back to the divine, the moment you say, I no longer need to carry this, you become weightless. And with that weightlessness comes vision, clarity, strength, compassion, joy. You begin to see the hidden architecture of the pain, how it shaped your resilience, how it opened your empathy, how it taught you what matters most. You begin to see how every soul is on a journey, and some are still asleep, some hurt others because they don't know how to do anything else. And while that does not excuse the harm, it allows you to release the illusion that their behavior was about you. It wasn't. It never was. It was about their own wound, their own fear, their own confusion. And you, being the light you are, were simply present when their darkness came through. You can honor the truth of your pain and still choose not to let it define you. You can acknowledge the impact and still choose your own liberation. You can tell the truth and still let it go. Because forgiveness is not the absence of memory. It is the presence of wisdom. You remember, but differently. You remember without hate, without shame, without vengeance. You remember with gentleness, with compassion, with a quiet, unshakable strength. You become a living prayer, not for justice, not for revenge, but for peace. A prayer that sounds like this: I forgive you, I release you, I bless the path that brought us here, and I walk forward free. And now, here you are standing at the edge of a new life. A life no longer built on wounds, but on wisdom. A life no longer defined by stories of pain, but by acts of grace. A life that no longer waits for someone to make it right, because you have made the most important choice of all to set yourself free. You may feel lighter already, or you may still feel the ache of letting go, but know this: whatever you feel is right, whatever arises is holy, because in the sacred act of forgiveness, everything becomes a teacher, even your trembling, even your tears. You are walking into the open now, into a future unshackled, into a heart unburdened, into a soul that no longer confuses its light with its losses. And though the world may still spin in its chaos, though others may never understand your depth or honor your path, you will know something they don't: that you are free, that no past can imprison the spirit that chooses to forgive, that no wound is stronger than the one who is willing to heal, that the highest act of courage is to love anyway, to release anyway, to rise anyway. So breathe deeply now, not as the one who was hurt, but as the one who has returned to wholeness. Breathe as the soul who no longer seeks permission to live unburdened. Breathe as the sacred, shining, radiant being you've always been, now uncloaked by the fog of old pain. This is not the end. This is your beginning. The beginning of a life rooted not in what broke you, but in what awakened through the breaking. You are not here to carry scars like trophies. You are here to turn wounds into wings. And forgiveness? Forgiveness is the wind beneath them. Now fly. There is a quiet revolution that begins not with a march, not with applause, not with a dramatic transformation on the outside. It begins with a whisper inside your own mind, the moment you stop speaking to yourself like an enemy and begin to speak to yourself like someone worth loving. You see, the voice in your head is not just commentary, it is creation. Every thought you send inwardly is a seed, and every seed you plant in the soil of your soul will eventually bear fruit in your outer experience. So, what happens when you've spent your entire life planting shame, guilt, fear, unworthiness, and self-rejection? You grow a life where your internal suffering gets reflected in every relationship, every opportunity, and every moment you live. Not because you are broken, but because you never learned that love begins with how you speak to yourself. When you tell a child over and over that they are not good enough, they will eventually stop trying to prove you wrong and start believing you're right. And when you tell yourself over and over that you are not beautiful, not valuable, not capable of healing, not deserving of happiness, your soul will begin to dim itself to match your words. This is not because the soul loses power. The soul never weakens, but it will wait. It will wait patiently for your permission to rise again. You do not need to wait until someone outside of you sees your worth before you begin to see it for yourself. That is not how awakening works. That is not how love works. That is not how God works. You are not a project for others to validate. You are a masterpiece waiting to be unveiled. And that unveiling begins when you speak to yourself with the reverence you deserve. What if your inner dialogue became your sanctuary? What if you decided just for today that every time you opened your mouth to speak to yourself, it would be in the tone you would use with someone you deeply cherished? What if the voice in your head wasn't a critic, but a guardian, a lover, a soul friend? Do you not realize that every single cell in your body listens to what you say about it? When you say, "I'm so tired of myself," your cells hear that. When you say, "I can't believe I'm still like this," your heart contracts. When you shame your emotions, your nervous system tightens. And when you look in the mirror and repeat the same cruel thoughts you were conditioned to believe, you train yourself to reject the divine creation you truly are. But there is a turning point, a sacred pivot, a holy reversal. And it begins not with a new external achievement, not with someone else's praise, not with a sudden miracle falling into your lap. It begins with a choice to change the way you speak to the one who has been with you since the beginning, your own precious self. You've been asking for healing, but healing cannot come to a home where the owner is always throwing stones at the walls. You cannot ask for wholeness while declaring your own inner world unworthy. Healing begins the moment you stop waging war against your humanity and start holding your inner world like sacred ground. Yes, you've made mistakes. Yes, there were things you said and did and believed that did not reflect your highest self. But those things are not you. They are chapters. They are clouds passing through the sky of your being. They are not the sky. They are not your eternal essence. They are not your truth. Speak to yourself like someone who is becoming, not someone who is failing. Speak to yourself like someone who is healing, not someone who is broken. Speak to yourself like someone God would look upon and smile, because that is exactly what's happening. You see, the ego will always want to keep score. It will remind you of every failure, every time you fell short, every standard you didn't meet, every time you disappointed someone. But the soul doesn't count like that. The soul doesn't keep records of wrongs. The soul is not transactional. The soul is not a performance-based system. The soul only knows love. And love speaks differently. Love doesn't shame. Love doesn't compare. Love doesn't say, "You should be further along." Love says, "I see you trying. I see you surviving. I see your silent courage." And love doesn't scream. Love whispers. Which is why your inner noise must be quieted, because you cannot hear love's whisper over the roar of your inner critic. Speak to yourself like someone worth loving, because love is not just something you give, it is something you are. And when you forget that, you begin to live as though love is somewhere out there beyond you, waiting for you to earn it. But love is not a reward. It is your origin. It is your essence. It is your birthright. And your words, your inner words, are the gatekeepers to remembering that. There is something miraculous that happens
When you stop talking to yourself like a victim of your past and start talking to yourself like the artist of your now, suddenly you don't need others to see your worth to feel it. Suddenly you stop begging for validation and start radiating it. Suddenly you realize that no one ever had the power to define you. They only had the power to distract you from defining yourself. And if you are still speaking to yourself through the voice of someone else's wound, an old parent, a harsh teacher, a former partner, then it is time to reclaim the microphone in your mind. You do not need to repeat the scripts you inherited. You are not required to carry on the legacy of internal war. You have permission to begin again. Pause, breathe, and say to yourself, I am not the opinion someone had of me. I am not the pain I internalized. I am not the shame I absorbed. I am a soul in progress. I am a being of light. I am allowed to evolve. Can you feel the shift? That quiet permission is not weakness. It is the birthplace of transformation. And when you speak to yourself as someone worth loving, the universe listens. Because the universe responds not to your words alone, but to the energy they carry. And there is no energy more attractive, more healing, more magnetic than the frequency of self-love expressed without ego, just pure presence, grace, and reverence. You were never meant to be your own jailer. You were meant to be your own liberator. And liberation begins with language, not external language, inner language. The voice you use when you're alone, the tone of your silence, the soundtrack of your self-perception. Would you dare to make that soundtrack a love song? Would you dare to look at yourself in the mirror, not to judge, not to fix, not to critique, but just to witness and bless? Because you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love. You need only to be present. You are not here to criticize your way into growth. You are not here to punish yourself into peace. And you are certainly not here to bully your heart into awakening. That path leads only to more illusion, more separation, more silent suffering. The soul doesn't respond to harshness. The soul responds to kindness, not the fleeting kind we show others to appear gentle, but the unwavering kind we offer ourselves when no one is watching. There is an alchemy that takes place when gentleness becomes your inner default. Not weakness, but the strength of tenderness. The power of speaking life into your own spirit when it's tempted to collapse under the weight of invisible expectations. To walk yourself out of your own shadows and say, even here, I am learning. Even this moment is holy. Even now, I choose compassion. And no, it doesn't always feel natural, especially not when your habits of thought have been rehearsing self-rejection for decades. But every time you catch yourself slipping into old patterns, every time you interrupt the cascade of judgment with a pause, with a breath, with a blessing, you rewrite the very frequency of your life. One inner sentence at a time. The most powerful affirmations are not the loud declarations you post on walls. They're the quiet phrases you whisper in moments of despair. They're the words you repeat when you feel like giving up. They are the sentences that cradle your own ache when you don't feel lovable. They are the mantras that say, I may not understand this pain yet, but I still choose to stay with myself. Stay. Stay with yourself. Because self-abandonment is the oldest wound. We have learned to leave ourselves at the first sign of discomfort. We've learned to escape our own feelings, to betray our needs, to become masterful at pretending because we were taught somewhere that our realness made us less lovable, but that teaching was false. And healing is remembering the truth that your wholeness was never conditional. You do not become lovable through perfection. You become aware of your lovability by releasing the illusion that it was ever in question. And so we return to the sacred truth that the way you speak to yourself is not simply inner dialogue. It is the climate in which your soul either shrivels or expands. It is the light or the poison. It is the temple or the torment. And you, dear soul, are the architect of that temple. So when your thoughts begin to spiral, when the voice in your mind turns sharp and cold, ask yourself gently, would I speak this way to a wounded child? Would I say this to someone trembling with grief? Would I say this to someone I love? And if the answer is no, then pause, breathe, and speak again with love. Because every harsh thought is an opportunity to remember who you truly are. Every internal criticism is a doorway to self-reclamation. Every moment of unconsciousness is an invitation to return. Return to love. Return to truth. Return to the whisper of God that lives not in thunder, but in stillness. Not in shame, but in surrender. Not in punishment, but in presence. You see, your inner voice is the place where divinity meets humanity. It is the field where the eternal and the temporal touch. And if you want to live a life that is aligned with peace, with purpose, with your highest self, then that alignment must begin not outside, but within the folds of your most intimate thoughts. Because no amount of external love can make up for internal absence. No amount of applause can fill the void created by your own neglect. No relationship, no possession, no title, no victory can replace the simple, sacred act of being kind to yourself in the silence. You are not your wounds. You are not your past. You are not the outdated conclusions you drew when you were hurting and too young to understand. You are a divine being having a human experience, not the other way around. And your humanity is not something to fix, it is something to love. When you make peace with that, you stop striving to prove yourself and begin the far more powerful journey of being yourself. And what a miracle that is, to be your own sanctuary, to become the friend you always sought in others, to become the mother, the father, the lover, the healer, the presence for yourself. This is the great spiritual assignment, not to reach for some faraway enlightenment, but to anchor light where you are, right now, in the form of your own words, your own breath, your own tenderness. It is the highest form of responsibility and the highest form of liberation. Because when you speak to yourself like someone worth loving, you don't just change your life, you change the lives of everyone around you. You become a mirror for healing, a lighthouse for those still lost in their own inner storm. You stop transmitting pain and start radiating peace. And suddenly, your existence becomes not a cry for attention, but a song of grace, a melody of wholeness, a quiet revolution that begins again with a whisper. So let today be the day you interrupt the spell, the hypnotic trance of unworthiness that's been rehearsed in your thoughts for far too long. Let today be the day you catch the voice that says, "You're too much," or "You're not enough." And respond not with more fear, but with forgiveness. Let it be the day you stop asking your wounds for permission to love yourself, because your wounds are not the authority your soul is. And the soul has never questioned your worth. Speak to yourself as if your words shape the universe, because in truth they do. Every vibration you send inward is echoed outward. Life bends to meet the frequency you hold within. If you treat yourself with disdain, you attract mirrors of that disdain. If you speak in love, you awaken love in every room you walk into. Not because you're trying to control outcomes, but because you're finally aligned with your source. There is no virtue in humility that erases your brilliance. There is no wisdom in modesty that silences your light. True humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself truthfully, without exaggeration or diminishment. And the truth is, you are already radiant, even if your eyes have yet to adjust to the light. You are not here to prove anything. You are here to remember everything, to remember your wholeness, to remember your sacredness, to remember that nothing you've been through has ever diminished your value, it has only dimmed your vision. But even the dimmest eye, when turned inward with love, can behold the divine. And when you do that, when you sit with yourself without an agenda, without judgment, without fixing, you begin to hear something underneath the noise, a softness, a presence, a voice that does not scream for attention, but calmly invites you back home. It says, I've never left you. It says, even when you forgot me, I was still here. It says, love yourself not because you've earned it, but because you exist. And that is the greatest miracle of all, to love yourself, not as a transaction, but as a remembrance, not as a reward, but as a return. Not because you've become someone else, but because you've remembered who you are. This is not a one-time event. It is a practice, a spiritual devotion. And like all devotions, it requires consistency, not perfection. There will be days where the old voices return, days where you forget your light, days where you relapse into shame. But on those days, speak even more gently. Meet your backsliding with more grace. For it is not the falling that undoes us, it is the cruelty we offer ourselves when we fall. Speak with the voice of a shepherd, not a warden. Speak with the love of a mother to her child, not a judge to a defendant. Speak with the knowing that your words are not passive, they are permission slips for the soul to bloom. And bloom you must, because the world is not healed by people who hate themselves into silence. The world is healed by those who dare to love themselves into expression, those who dare to show up fully, those who, despite their scars, choose to speak with tenderness, those who treat their own presence as sacred, and in doing so, give others permission to do the same. You cannot give what you do not possess. If you want to give love, give it first to yourself. If you want to forgive others, begin by forgiving the voice in you that forgot how to be kind. If you want to be light for others, clean the lens through which your own light shines, and that lens is language. Speak to yourself like someone who is not done becoming. Speak to yourself like someone who still believes in their own healing. Speak to yourself like someone who is loved by God, because you are, always have been, and always will be. And when you do, you become a field of grace in a world that so often forgets. You become a reminder that tenderness is strength, that compassion is power. That silence can be holy when it is filled with self-respect, not self-hate. You become not someone who acts like love, but someone who is love, radiant, rooted, real. And when others encounter you, when they hear the way you speak, feel the way you walk, sense the peace in your presence, they may not know exactly what changed in you, but they'll feel it. They'll feel safer. They'll feel more open. They'll feel, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that they are allowed to love themselves too. And in that ripple, healing begins. Not because you preached, not because you tried to convince, but because you embodied what you once only hoped for. And the voice you now use, the one that once berated and bruised, has become the voice of healing. That is your legacy. And we are now nearing the closing threshold of this sacred message, this whispered return to truth. There is something profoundly holy about learning to hold space for yourself, not as a project, not as a burden, not as a list of improvements waiting to be made, but as a living, breathing miracle. You are not here to measure up. You are here to wake up. And waking up isn't a race toward perfection. It is the soft unveiling of what has always been divine underneath the noise. When you begin to truly speak to yourself like someone worth loving, your entire relationship with life changes. You no longer treat time as an enemy. You no longer chase after moments hoping they'll make you feel whole. You no longer bow to the pressure of being someone you are, not just to earn temporary approval. Instead, you become quiet, rooted, steady. You begin to walk through this world like a soul that remembers its source. And when your mind wants to panic, when the old wounds rise, when the fear tries to dress itself in logic, you return to the inner sanctuary you've been building. You return to the voice that doesn't panic, the one that doesn't shame, the one that says, we've been here before, and still you rise. You speak peace into chaos. You speak comfort into uncertainty. You speak grace into guilt. And slowly, what once triggered you becomes your invitation. What once scared you becomes your initiation. And what once separated you from yourself becomes the very doorway back to presence. No one else can do this work for you. You can read every book, attend every seminar, follow every teacher, and still, if your inner voice is cruel, the world will feel unkind. Not because the world is against you, but because your perception is filtered through your own unresolved self-judgment. So choose to be your own revolution. Let your mind be the garden of your highest devotion. Let every thought be filtered through the lens of love. Not because you're trying to be spiritual, but because you are spirit remembering what it feels like to come home. You don't need to correct every mistake to be worthy of compassion. You don't need to fix every flaw before you grant yourself gentleness. You don't need to reach some imagined peak of enlightenment to finally allow yourself rest. All you need is the willingness to be present with yourself as you are and speak the words you most need to hear. Try this. I forgive myself for forgetting who I am. I honor myself for surviving what I did not deserve. I release the need to criticize what is still healing. I speak love into every broken piece, not to fix it, but to remind it that it was never truly broken. This is the frequency of self-reunion. This is what it means to reclaim your voice, to not just think differently, but to feel differently. To not just change your narrative, but to soften into the sacredness of being. And when you make that shift from aggression to affection, from resistance to reverence, you begin to see it ripple outward, not just in how you speak to yourself, but in how you speak to your past, to your future, to others, to the very mystery of life itself. You stop begging life to be gentle with you and instead become the source of that gentleness. You stop chasing peace like a possession and realize it's been inside your voice all along. You stop searching for someone to save you and begin the holy work of meeting yourself exactly where you are. That is the foundation. That is the breakthrough. That is the sacred silence that speaks louder than any performance. And now, with this grounded tenderness, we are ready to enter the final movement, the last unfolding breath of this journey. So here you are, not at the beginning of a new performance, but at the end of pretending, not at the edge of becoming someone else, but at the soft arrival into who you've always been beneath the noise. The voice you once used as a weapon has been returned to its true purpose: healing, blessing, creating, restoring. And as this truth begins to settle into the deeper layers of your being, you start to remember that your voice has never been just yours. It has always been a channel, a transmitter, a vessel for the divine to speak into form. And when you speak to yourself like someone worth loving, you are not just changing the course of your own life, you are participating in the healing of the entire collective. Because every time you interrupt shame with compassion, every time you replace judgment with grace, every time you choose presence over punishment, you are releasing a frequency into the world that uplifts all of us. You are making love louder than fear. You are becoming the antidote to a culture of self-rejection. You are saying to the universe, through your very breath, I am ready to be at peace with myself. I am ready to walk with dignity. I am ready to live like someone who remembers their divinity. And in that remembering, you start to forgive more easily. You stop taking things so personally. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing to be understood by everyone because you are finally understood by yourself. You look in the mirror and no longer search for what's wrong, you see what's sacred. You catch your own eye and smile, not because life is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You rest. You soften. You stop rushing. You make space for the kind of joy that doesn't need to be loud to be real. And most of all, you trust. You trust that the voice of love will guide you home again and again if only you're willing to listen. Because that voice isn't far away. It isn't hidden. It's not in some distant mountaintop retreat. It's not behind 1,000 steps of self-improvement. It is here, now, within, a whisper, waiting to become your song. So speak it. Say the words your heart has been aching to hear. I am safe with myself. I am no longer a threat to my own spirit. I am no longer a stranger to my own soul. I am worthy of gentleness, even when I fall. I am no longer at war with myself. And let every thought that follows be drenched in this energy. Let it bleed into your choices. Let it reshape your relationships. Let it slow your pace. Let it soften your gaze. Let it become your new default, not a performance, but a presence. You are not here to fight yourself. You are here to forgive yourself into freedom. You are not here to critique your reflection. You are here to revere it. You are not here to beg for worthiness. You are here to remember you are worthiness, embodied. And that memory, that soul deep recognition is the revolution. So speak, beloved. Speak to yourself like someone worth loving, because you are. You always were, and you always will be.